all, we welcome you. Thank you all so much for coming today. Obviously, this is not the original plan, but we made it work. That's great. Thank you. So we want to give a quick thank you. Well, first, I just want to give a special thank you to our first Selectman, Curley, and to our Middletown council member, Grady Faulkner, and State Rep Kai Belton for joining us today. Appearance and celebrating with us today. And we have so many different great organizations around that you've probably seen. We have a great educational treasure hunt for all ages in the other room down the hall. And we're going to have the food coming out as soon as our presentations are done, as well as free ice cream. I want to give a big thank you to all of our sponsors. So our Committee on Solidarity of the Town of Portland collaborated this year with True Vine Holiness Church, our wonderful helpers. True Vine is celebrating 100 years this year. And we have Barbara, who has been a big help, and her brother David, who grew up in Portland and have been, just fantastic on our Juneteenth committee, so we're so glad to collaborate with them. We also have Portland Youth and Family Services, Portland Social Justice Coalition, Middlesex Habitat for Humanity, Portland Library, and Liberty Bank sponsoring our ice cream truck. So everyone has been so helpful. We've also received support from Dell Printing, Minuteman Press, Adams Market, giving free water in the cooler over here. There's some water by the bounce house. Middlesex United Way sent us a great team of helpers, volunteers, along with Habitat. And Andy at Parks and Recreation has been a big support for this event. So we are so grateful, and we just, we have Anthony. Anthony from Zoju Foods has saved the day for us with food, which is coming soon. And he'll give a little talk at the end of our speeches so that he can tell you about the food. So Mixed Chalk will, our fantastic DJ today, will introduce us.
Are y'all ready to celebrate today? Oh, over here. Are y'all ready to celebrate today? Great celebration we're doing, and the sun's coming out, we made it work, so let's continue on. So I would love to introduce with you guys Dorothy Riley, who's going to sing with us, Lift Every Voice and Sing. You guys should have the lyrics here with you there. So thank you, Dorothy. Good over, Dorothy.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Riley. I'm a senior at PHS. I'd just like to let you know that I'm not singing the entire song in only 2 verses, so just a warning if you can't keep track of where I am. Is everybody ready? Yeah. Okay. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening stars. Let it resound loud as a rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought. They sing the rising sun.
Dorothy. We're going to keep the program going and calling up Mr. Barry Rogers is going to be reading the poem. Guys, come on, guys. Give it up for Barry Rogers. To make do with the mic stand. We're doing a lot of things and just making do with it. If we need to, you can.
It's okay.
You got
It's okay. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I said good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right. I'm glad to be here today. Thank all of you for coming. I am going to do a poem from Paul Lawrence Dunbar, who was an American poet, novelist, and short story writer. He was born on June 27, 1872 in Dayton, Ohio. His parents were slaves in Kentucky before the American Civil War. He published his first poem at the age of 16 in a Dayton newspaper and served as president of his high school literacy society. At the age of 18, he wrote the poem Emancipation, which I will read to you at this moment. Fling out your banners, your honors be bringing. Raise to the ether your paeans of praise. Strike every chord and let music be ringing. Celebrate freely this day of all days. Few are the years since that notable blessing raised you from slaves to the powers of men. Each year has seen you, my brothers, progressing, never to sink to that level again. Perched on your shoulders sits liberty smiling, perched where the eyes of the nations can see. Keep from her pinions all contact defiling. Show by your deeds what you're destined to be. Press boldly forward, nor waver, nor falter. Blood has been freely poured out in your cause. Lives sacrificed upon liberty's altar. Press to the front, it were craven to pause. Look to the heights that are worth your attaining. Keep your feet firm in the path to the goal. Toward noble deeds, every effort be straining. Worthy ambition is food for the soul. Up, men and brothers, be noble, be earnest. Right is the time and success is assured. Know that your fate was the hardest and sternest when through those last-ringing days you endured. Never again shall the manacles gore you. Never again shall the whip stroke defame. Nobles and freemen, your destinies call you. Onward to honor, to glory and fame. Happy Juneteenth, everyone.
We're going to bring up, and I forgive me, I should have probably asked how to pronounce her name, but we're going to have an original poem by Naji Chester-Payne. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Test. Mic check 1, 2. Good? I have a big voice anyway. Yeah, it's all good. So, just really quick. My wisdom teeth haven't come in. Yeah. It's been like a year. So just really quick, I just want to say that I'm one of your local personal trainers, so if you ever need one. In the circle, I'm over there with Mike and Mr. Pelton over there. And also, yeah, so I have a fundraiser for the American Cancer Society. It's a professional wrestling event. It's free for everyone. Please come out, please come support. It was great last year, great for the town of Portland. A lot of people got to put their eyes on the beautiful town of Portland, and that's all I hear from them the professional wrestling organization is that they get all these random people who talk about that event that was in Portland. So, you know, I just want to see more Portland people there. So, Portland people there, show up. You know, don't let the Rhode Island people out. Jeez. But either way, please come out and support everything that goes on in Portland. You know, I try to do it. I try to do it as much as I can. So everybody, thank you for being here for this. This is cool. And kudos to our first selectman. You know, he's a man. Don't shy away from it. He actually showed up to my event last year. You know what I mean? So, right on. That was awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
When is it? Yeah.
August 26th. All right. August 26th at the Riverfront Park. All right. So, mark it up. All right. So, I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to be here. So, the last 2 days I was scrambling and I just wrote something up. And, you know, I like to just deliver the good word, you know, just for people to think and just lead with a little positivity from what I send out to you, you know. I like to deliver my energy not only through my personal training, but my poetry as well. And that's how I deliver it. So, let's go. Every day is different, never the same sight. Am I reborn in the morning, then die again at night? Do my dreams matter? What do they mean? Are they a memory waving through time's stream? What is time? Does it tick and top? Does it run infinity through space? Does it ever stop? Can I grasp my days? Or does it stray away like sand in my hand? Is there a higher power? Is there an ultimate plan? Is there a labyrinth that enters the unseen lane? What is the human? Is the evolved animal or something else? We need air, shelter, water, food, but do we need wealth? Should money be able to buy a person better health? What is our destination? What is our goal? Do we continue to endanger peace into extinction as our story is told? What will it take for humanity to become bold? We must move beyond our differences, peer more into our soul, fuse paths apart, join together, and become whole. As one, we are strong, like roots into the tree trunk, or the solidification of a volcano, building itself. Change happens, it is and will be. Let's all stop with a sense of humility. Use the ability to grow from within like the seed. Open our eyes, clear them, let's all try to see.
Down the riverfront, thank you. All right, let's keep the program going, and we'd like to bring up, and from a teacher to another, I'm really excited to meet the Teacher of the Year from Manchester Public Schools. Guys, put your hands together for Josh Curzan.
Adjust this mic. Thank you, everybody.
Got it?
I think so. All right.
Got my microphone just to be clear.
Thank you. All right. So as being a teacher, you can expect a little bit of a history lesson here. So bear with me. Thank you so much. It's so great to see family and friends in our town celebrating this occasion, Juneteenth. It's just fantastic. I'm going to begin with this African proverb, and I actually oftentimes begin my classes with this in my African American history course. Until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. This is an African proverb, and it was made famous by Chinua Achebe, a Nigerian author who wrote Things Fall Apart. And I'd like to use that proverb to kind of found the basis for what I'd like to tell you guys today. So what is the story of the lion in that proverb? Nations, municipalities sanitize history, making it more palatable, and they speak only of the hunter. It is not always done with malice, however. Sometimes it's merely the fact that the proverbial lion has never been truly allowed to speak. So, Juneteenth, no intention of taking away what in our country our founding fathers had established with the ideas of liberty that forged our nation, because that is a great American thing that we have. But the reality is, though, that many people could not enjoy those freedoms, so eloquently stated in the Declaration of Independence or coded into our Constitution. One of the most important documents of history, up there with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, is and should be the Emancipation Proclamation. This declaration has a clear connection to Juneteenth, which we're celebrating today, and commemorates the end of slavery in America. Just to give you a little background on that, the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 freed about 4 million African Americans in rebel states. However, slavery in America did not end after Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation went into effect. In Texas and other pockets of the South, slavery had continued. 2.5 years later, there were still enslaved men and women and children who did not know that they had been freed. It's estimated that, get this, there were still about 250,000 enslaved people in Texas after the Civil War officially ended. So Juneteenth celebrates June 19th, 1865, the day Major General Gordon Granger and 1,800 troops arrived at Galveston, Texas, and spread word that slavery had ended. And to put this into perspective, this was months after General Ulysses S. Grant accepted Robert E. Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse in April 1865. Now, I know as a student growing up, I learned that day, but I didn't really learn what had transpired after, and the fact that so many enslaved people were still kept in bondage afterward. So when the people found out that they were free, they started celebrating, and that's the origin of Freedom Day, Emancipation Day, Juneteenth, Jubilee Day. And Emancipation Proclamation, which caused that to happen, is so important because it began a process that the U.S. government was now finally taking a firm stand to say that slavery was wrong and that it must end. Before that, it had not. Opening the way for further legislation designed to grant Black people their civil and human rights, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments officially abolished slavery nationwide, granting citizenship status to African Americans, and prohibited voter discrimination, and respectively. Of course, we know, though, if you're a student of history, that this dark history of racial injustice followed the short-lived gains during Reconstruction, which ended in 1877. Jim Crow era segregation, lynching, racial terror, racial discrimination against voting rights and housing, and the struggle continues. So, in summary, with that really a little short part before I get into how it can connect to us, that celebration finally became a federal holiday in 2023. The last time I had spoken publicly about this, it was 2020, and we were advocating for this movement to happen. And what an amazing thing, it's the first federal holiday to be approved since Martin Luther King Day in 1983. Take that into account, okay? That's amazing. Worth applauding is that while all 50 states now recognize Juneteenth, Connecticut is among at least 28 states, more than half of the United States, to legally recognize the day as a paid state holiday. And that began this last year. So that's an amazing thing. Now, I think a lot of us are like-minded and we're here for a reason, but there's still so many people in our country and our town that have their understanding of Juneteenth and their personal connection to it is a little bit vague. So let's go over some history, and learning and comprehending history should begin at the local level. So let's consider Portland really quick. So first thing, and this is a shocker to a lot of my students, slavery existed here in Connecticut from 1639 to 1848. As early as the 1660s, there might have been a few enslaved Africans across the river in Middletown. And there is historical proof of this from 1687. In the ensuing decades, the population grew as a result of births as well as arrivals from the West Indies or Africa. Ships built in Middletown and maybe Portland participated certainly in the triangular trade, transporting slave-produced rum, sugar, molasses, coffee, salt, nutmeg, Connecticut nutmeggers, and on occasion, enslaved Africans themselves. According to the History of Middlesex County, Town of Portland by the Honorable William H. Buell, published in 1884, quote, slavery existed to a certain extent in Portland. Every prominent family owned one or more Negroes who were well cared for and kindly treated. So kind. Thank you, Honorable Buell. And in A History of Portland, Connecticut by Francis Solomon Murphy, published posthumously in 1969, and I read this book, by the way, at Valley View. This was a quote from there. A minister in our town once owned slaves. He was kind to them and probably saw nothing wrong in one man owning another. Now this book, by the way, if any of you are familiar with it, you grew up in town, it's a green hardcover volume. Really was a labor of love, and I think we can overlook the old-fashioned narrative of that and understand the great things that Mrs. Murphy had included, the Wangunk and the indigenous people. But the narrative is a familiar one in American history. We kind of brush over that. Oh yeah, but they were treated well. They were treated like family. But it was here in Portland. It was here in Portland, and we have record of that. In 1836, Sylvester Gildersleeve launched the schooner William Breanne, the first vessel to make regular voyages between New York and Texas. The journey proved so successful that investors established a regular New York and Galveston line. Galveston. You guys know Galveston? You should. Juneteenth, that's where it was first mentioned, right? Daniel Granger, Galveston, Texas. Between 1847 and 1815, S. Gildersleeve and Sons built 5 ships for this line, named them all after Texas patriots: Stephen F. Austin, B.R. Milan, William B. Travis, J.W. Fanning, William H. Wharton, all slave owners in Texas, by the way. It's also reasonable to believe that these ships also transported southern cotton harvested by slave labor to New England textile factories. This line continued in operation until 1861, when the Civil War began to break out. And of course, we, like many other New England communities, also helped to resist slavery. There's long been speculation that there were houses in Portland that were part of the Underground Railroad, as referenced in Mrs. Murphy's 1969 book, by the way, although we don't yet have official historical record of that yet. But we do know that there were 2 confirmed stations across the river in Middletown. And we had some connections to Middletown's anti-slavery society. Besides that, I want to go into really quickly how African Americans here in Portland were also agents of their own change, resilience, and agency, and how the message of the Emancipation Proclamation had an effect on our community. So think of our prized Portland brownstone, and think how beautiful it is and how it really put us on the map, quite literally. Think of also the fact that men and women who were perhaps the same deep shade of brown, although free by this time, did not enjoy the equal rights and opportunities of their white neighbors. And they knew that their brothers and sisters were held in bondage in other parts of the country. Portland, in 1860 census, was 3,657 people. In that census, there were 10 free colored, 5 men, 5 women. Connecticut fielded 30 regiments during the Civil War, while the majority of volunteers from Connecticut probably did not fight to emancipate slaves, some most certainly did. One of these units was a full African American regiment, the 29th Colored Regiment, as well as the beginnings of the 30th Colored Regiment. 78% of eligible black men enrolled in the 29th and 30th regiments, even though many black laborers earned wages that were higher than Army pay. So they were sacrificing something to serve in this volunteer unit. Mustered in March 1864, both groups of soldiers, totaling about 1,700 men, served heroically through the end of the war, sustaining more than 600 casualties. Yet they initially faced unequal pay until June 1864. Frederick Douglass, I hope we know him, spoke to the troops in New Haven. "You are the pioneers of the liberty of your race. If you rise and flourish, we shall rise and flourish. If you win freedom and citizenship, we shall share your freedom and citizenship." According to the Index of Colored Troop Enlistments, which is at the Connecticut State Library, and again, Portland has about 3,600 at the 1860 census, 2 colored soldiers in the 29th were born right here in Portland, Connecticut. They were marked down as farmers. Their names are Alfred L. Mosley, he was 20 years old at the time, and David Thomas, 24 years old. They were both described as black men and served in the Connecticut 29th. 6 more colored soldiers who resided in Portland, Connecticut, joined the 30th Regiment. Born in different places, some in the South, 2 were sailors, 1 a farmer, a cook, a waiter, a stonecutter, ages 20 through 43. Now consider the fact that just a few years earlier in 1860 it was said that there were 5 free colored men living in town. It's quite possible that every man of color volunteered to fight in this regiment to end slavery. This is a real live connection to Portland. After serving in Grant's overland campaign in Virginia, this regiment sailed to Texas. Later in June 1865, just a couple of weeks after the first Juneteenth. Now, just 1 month before returning to Connecticut to be honorably discharged, white voters in Connecticut have rejected a proposed amendment to the state's constitution that would have given blacks the right to vote. So these soldiers, some from Connecticut, some right here, who were stonecutters, farmers, free men, they would remain disenfranchised until 1870 with the adoption of the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. One more legacy of racial intolerance. So why remember Juneteenth, especially in our small community? We are all connected, and we want to remove obstacles that come in the way of making others feel welcomed in our community, to make sure that there's always a seat at the table. We are a community that should be motivated to secure full independence and equality for all people. Emancipation was one step toward full equality, but in many ways African Americans and other people of color remained in bondage, poor education, lack of access to proper health care, racial wealth gap, biased sentencing and criminal justice programs, etc. Discrimination and racial prejudice persist owing to ignorance and the failure to learn each other's stories. Today, and this commemoration that we will have annually, is an opportunity to acknowledge a history that shaped and influenced our society today, even here in this town. If we learn from another, then we can make lasting improvements. We need to fight for equality, face hard truths, and struggle to end racial injustice. We should honor the lives of enslaved African Americans, including those that were in this very town, and of their descendants and those who fight for their equal rights, and celebrate this day of freedom. Making sure that our history is told is critical to supporting and sustaining our growth as a people. This is why Juneteenth is part of our American story. It centers people of African descent in a way that puts the black freedom struggle in the middle of the American story. It tells a story that so often is overshadowed by how we have culturally celebrated the supposed noble and heroic men of the Confederacy, for example, or how we have celebrated the hard work and determination of European immigrants, many of them our immediate ancestors, while failing to recognize the toil and constant discrimination that enslaved Africans and their descendants have faced. Instead of erasure, we need to be inclusive and finally seek to tell the untold stories. What if they were in Mrs. Murphy's history book of Portland that I read as a young student? Why weren't they? Well, because of the scarcity of those stories, the scarcity of objects even, to represent the black past here in Connecticut and in our town. They were largely unrecorded, and even the men and women themselves, perhaps in unmarked graves forgotten in potter's fields. One thing that we have been working on in many towns, and myself in Manchester, has been a Witness Stones project, bringing some of these stories to light, and these individual stories, which I know Mr. John Mills will bring up. We don't need to replace or rewrite history. We just need to speak that proverbial lion's side of the history. Instead of the glorified hunter, or the colonist, or the shipbuilder, or the quarryman, and offer it up as equally significant. Even in our small town, the lion story, the unknown and unrecorded history, is still largely unknown. Thanks to the Historical Society doing some amazing research there, I've looked at it and I hope you get the chance to browse. These stories are still there for being uncovered. Sometimes we can't see how we will affect change. Before the Emancipation Proclamation, slavery was something that most people thought that would perhaps continue forever. But it's important, and it ultimately led to a fundamental change in citizenship and equality. And so I hope that people will really realize that they have a right to demand and affect change, because change is possible. In summary, in my eyes, we have two Independence Days. 4th of July, which we celebrate the freedom of our land, the freedom of promise to be our best selves as a country, but also Juneteenth, June 19th, which finally freed the people. Juneteenth feels new to many of us, to most of us here in the Northeast, but we're taking something that happened back in 1865, something that should have happened a lot earlier than that, and we just happen to finally be talking about it now. And unlike most of us who had to learn about it as adults, or teach people that up here, now my kids, our community, can learn that as they are young. And that just makes us better members of our community, better Americans, better Connecticut nutmeggers, and better residents of Portland, Connecticut. Thank you so much.
We have a couple more speakers coming up, but just to piggyback off what Josh has said, that we're going to have our history walk, the treasure hunt, so make sure you take a look at that, learn a little bit more about our history. Again, most of us are learning this now as adulthood, so don't miss an opportunity to learn some more. You can pass that knowledge on to someone else. So be sure to check out the treasure hunt once we break from these speakers. All right, so let's keep it going. We're going to bring up the president and founder of the Breanne Corporation, John Mills. I'm going to have him play the name of the corporation with this up. Thank you, John Mills, come on up. Alright, I need first aid this corporation, so let people remember who we are and where we're coming from.
I appreciate that. Where you at, John? I love that. That was awesome. Go ahead, John. About the Connecticut 30th Colored Regiment, because 29th has a memorial in Haven, but the 30th merged in with the 31st New York Regiment, and thus we don't celebrate them as much here in Connecticut. I'm working on that. We need to do that, right? We're going to do that. All right. All right. Good afternoon. Generally, when I talk about this topic, I have like structure around, the date and the historical components, but I'm going to do something a little bit different today. For my remarks, I hope you don't mind if I tell a story instead. It's a short story, but an extremely common story. One one of many similar stories I've come to know over time in my journey through life. One day, sometime around the year 1830, on a plantation in Georgia, a male child was born into the physical and mental confines of slavery. He was given the name Ned. From the earliest days of his life, Ned surely witnessed the cruelty and hardships endured by those held as property. As he grew into a young man, Ned started a family with a woman enslaved with him. I imagine he savored the moments of joy amidst the difficulty around him. But unfortunately, the cruel hand of fate would eventually intervene, tearing him away from his new family. Sold to a new enslaver, Ned was uprooted from the familiar soil of Georgia and transported to the vast plains of Texas. Arriving in Texas around the age of 27, I imagine Ned carried a heavy heart, burdened by the weight of despair from being sold away from his young family. It was during Ned's first year with his new enslaver in Texas that the Supreme Court delivered the Dred Scott ruling, declaring in 1857 that African Americans were not and could not ever be citizens of the United States. Considered now to be one of the worst Supreme Court rulings in our nation's history, I imagine this news likely pained Ned's soul, as I assume it did all people of color, enslaved or not, no matter whether in the North or South. In the years that followed, Ned would marry a woman enslaved with him and have 4 kids, establishing a new family in Texas. He would also witness Texas secede from the Union, aligning with the Confederacy, and live to see the Civil War begin in April of 1861. I can hardly imagine the idea of being stripped away from one's family, taken to a new state, then starting a new family, all while enslaved during a Civil War. In 1863, President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation likely reached Ned's ear through the murmurs of fellow enslaved. The proclamation promised freedom, but all enslavers did not honor that proclamation, and Ned couldn't risk escape, especially not without his family. He'd already lost a family. I would think the mere thought of losing another family was unbearable. I imagine the weight Ned carried eased a bit at the end of the Civil War, when General Gordon Granger wrote in the Galveston, reading General Order No. 3, enforcing the Emancipation Proclamation. The date was June 19, 1865, now commemorated as Juneteenth. Alas, Ned is free. As a requirement to rejoin the Union, Southern states were required to complete the voter registration of all eligible male citizens over the age of 21 by September 1st of 1867. Ned's name was entered into the Texas voter registration law on July 24th, 1867. Giving crucial details such as his age, number of years he'd been in Texas, and his place of birth, which was Georgia, marking the first known documented record of his existence. A year later, the 14th Amendment officially granted Ned citizenship, something the Supreme Court denied just a decade prior. I struggle to imagine the emotions that must have gathered in his soul. The recognition of his humanity, even if only on paper. Ned would have 4 additional children after the Civil War. Not knowing how to read or write, Ned would work tirelessly as a farmer, sometimes as a blacksmith, toiling under the sun and still facing racism and oppression. His wife would die shortly before the turn of the century, leaving him a widower. I imagine his life wasn't easy, even though he saw his life through the lens of humility, through wise eyes, as having a glass that was half full, reflecting the resilient nature of his ancestors. His children all joined him in farming the Texas soil, as did his grandchildren, after his death shortly after the turn of the century. Ned was buried in the woods behind a whites-only cemetery in Kilgore, Texas, unmarked and now lost to time. Although he lived in a nation that eventually acknowledged his right to freedom, and shortly thereafter finally acknowledged he was a citizen, he would experience segregation in life and now in death. This climate of racial bias and oppression was not tolerable to his youngest grandson. His name was Milo. So Milo made a difficult decision in the 1930s. Fleeing violent threats from white Americans, Marvin sought refuge in California, leaving his Texas family behind and joining the historic Great Migration, the transformative movement of 6 million black Americans over 7 decades, escaping the clutches of racial violence, seeking economic opportunity and freedom from oppression. In California, Marvin would marry and build a life. There he welcomed a son into the world who he named after his oldest brother, Johnny, who in concert also had a son who he named Johnny. And that individual is me. So, you see, I exist because of a long legacy of persistence and perseverance, of people who were demeaned, devalued, and scarcely documented. Therefore, I find it imperative that I search for, collect, catalog, and regurgitate the many threads of documentation of the African American experience. Those items that were intentionally buried, hidden, disregarded, or denied. I see researching the enslaved as not a mere intellectual exercise. As an African American, I see it as a profound act of resistance. By unearthing, studying, and sharing these stories, we reject the historical practice of erasure. Refuse to be complicit, and reclaim their place in our country's history, presenting the template and opportunity for our broader society to do the same. Connecting the lines to those persisting challenges that reverberate today. So last year, I founded the Alex Breanne Corporation. It's a 501c3 nonprofit named after my youngest daughter, who at age 22 was found unresponsive, placed in ICU, and given zero chance for survival by multiple neurologists. But with God's grace, she awoke hours prior to a planned disconnection of life support. Her story aligns well to the narrative of resilience, reflecting that very attribute of our ancestors. The intent of Alex Breanne Corporation is to fund efforts that shine a light on the lives of the enslaved and the communities they once called home, presenting our research through the lens and perspective of a descendant. We have multiple research and recognition efforts in flight here in Connecticut, the most prominent being our work to honor Prince Mortimer, a formerly enslaved man from Guinea, Africa, brought to this country as a young man in the 1730s, enslaved in Middletown just across the river for decades, a servant in the Revolutionary War to officers including George Washington. At age 70, he was promised freedom in the will of his enslaver, only to be refused when that will was thrown out in contest by the son-in-law of the enslaver. At age 87, he was sent to prison for life, accused of attempting to poison his new enslaver, the son-in-law, spending the next 23 years in prison, dying at Wethersfield Prison at age 110 in 1834. As was common for Connecticut state prisoners at the time, who were poor or had no family to reclaim their body, he was likely sent to Yale for dissection after his death. I've worked with Yale trying to find the paper trail. We haven't found it yet, but both I and the Yale officials that I'm working with agree that he was likely sent there. To honor Prince, my nonprofit is working with the state of Connecticut to create a Prince Mortimer trail, placing the state emblem at the locations he worked, lived, and was in prison, incorporating this into the state's Freedom Trail. We're also working with Middletown officials to establish an honorary street name, Prince Mortimer Avenue, at what is now Rapallo Avenue, which was historically a path that Prince walked each morning on his way to work, making ropes for ships. And finally, we're working with local developer J.R. Carnegie Hargraves to honor Prince within a redevelopment effort at the actual rope-making location where Prince worked while enslaved in Middletown. We're talking through murals, plaques, even renaming a seating area as Prince Mortimer Park. Through these and other endeavors, Alex Breanne Corporation aims to educate as well as promote understanding, empathy, and inspire good, God-fearing people, now armed with information, to look in the mirror and perform a self-assessment into whether they may be unwittingly aligning to biases that are the result of the reverberating effects of a past time. And so the story of my great-great-grandfather Ned lives on through the work I do and the reflection I see in the mirror each morning. But not just mine, the reflection we all see. For no matter whether by force in the South due to an American Civil War, gradual emancipation in the North by individual state law, whether the descendant of an enslaver, of an enslaved, or both, like me, whether you are the descendant of those who were complicit, benefiting from the spoils of colonialism, or those who fought against it, we are all intertwined in a complicated quilt, which is the American experiment. So today, I'm happy to join you all in celebrating the indomitable strength of the human spirit, the manifestation of our shared independence and our collective freedom that is Juneteenth. Thank you.
Juneteenth Proclamation, come on down.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Curley. I'm the first Selectman in Portland, and it is my privilege to be here to celebrate with all of you today. You can tell a lot about an event by the quality of the people who were up here previously. And we wouldn't have this event here today without the Committee on Solidarity, who have worked very, very, very hard on this event. And as you can see outside, we had a little bit of a weather issue this morning, and so all of the planning that went into this event had to be changed to fit us here today. And so I really want to thank Liz Habino for and they did a great job, so thank you. So I'm here on behalf of the town of Portland, and I'd like to invite our fellow selectmen up with me so I can read this proclamation. This was a proclamation that was issued at our earlier meeting in the month of June. And so we have Ralph Zampano is here, John Dillon, Sean Manning, Deputy First Selectman Mike Pelton, and Bobby Hetrick and Michael Hernandez are not able to be with us today, but are here in spirit. So with that, I'm going to read this proclamation. This is a proclamation for Juneteenth. Whereas President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, declaring the slaves in Confederate territory free, paving the way for the passing of the 13th Amendment, which formally abolished slavery in the United States of America. And whereas the Emancipation Proclamation had little impact on the Texans due to the minimal number of Union troops to enforce the new executive order. However, with the surrender of General Lee in April of 1865 and the arrival of Major General Gordon Granger's regiment, the forces were finally strong enough to influence and overcome the resistance. And whereas one of General Granger's first orders of business was to read to the people of Texas General Order Number 3, which began most significantly with, the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and free laborer. And whereas Juneteenth, also known as Juneteenth Independence Day or Freedom Day, combines the words June and 19th and commemorates the June 19, 1865 announcement of abolition of slavery through the former Confederate States of America, and has been celebrated by the African American community for over 150 years. And whereas Juneteenth today celebrates African American freedom and achievement with the mission to promote and cultivate knowledge and appreciation of African American history and culture, while encouraging continuous self-development and respect for all cultures. Now therefore, be it resolved that I, Ryan J. Curley, First Selectman of the Town of Portland, Connecticut, hereby proclaims June 19th, 2023 as Juneteenth Day in the Town of Portland, Connecticut, and urges all citizens to become more aware of the significance of this celebration in African American history and the heritage of our nation, state of Connecticut, and as Josh said, the Town of Portland as well. In witness whereof, I do hereby set my hand and cause the seal of Portland to be affixed this 7th day of June in the year 2023. Attested Ryan J. Curley, First Selectman, Board of Selectmen, John H. Dillon, Michael S. Hernandez, Robert W. Hedrick Jr., Sean P. May, Michael A. Pelton, and Ralph R. Zantan. Thank you all.
Let's get this party started, guys. Let's go. I'm sorry, just kidding. I got excited. I was getting 1 second. I got excited with the proclamation. I thought we were free over here to go. Ready to go. Listen, we got one more announcement. We have Anthony from Zoju Foods, which is out there, and he would like to say a few things about the food right there.
So,
What's up? What's up? That was my fault.
no, it's all good. Everybody's free to eat in just a moment. It's not free, but it is sponsored, and I can't thank anybody enough. Elizabeth, this organization, what you guys are doing at Town of Portland, the state of Connecticut. Personal training and teacher, I do those things. Just playing. My restaurant is off in Connecticut, and I do play-based schools. My journey started about 6 years ago, and it really came from just historical issues. Diabetes, cancer. We know there's racial oppression, and we know there's bias and all of those things, food deserts. I had to do my part to change that. My asthma and allergies got better. Although I'm a lifelong athlete, I saw amazing changes just in me. And with that being said, I really wanted to influence business and life and events and culture. So anyways, what I'm serving today, there's a veggie burger and there's a Beyond Burger. Both are vegan. However, I share that because we talk about historical influences, right? Now, 150 years ago, today, a lot of people don't have access to medicine. With that being said, I'm using a Dijon mustard and a red pepper relish. There's a lot of historical influence in that, where we use those medicines for those who were enslaved, those people still today, use food as medicine and help clean out worms and things that we were given from either pig's feet, oxtail, the list goes on. So again, my influence on changing young people today, some of y'all older than me, not many, and my generation is through medicine. So again, it will come that. I will also have organic agave that helps support that spice, but that spice is cancerous fighting, it fights diabetes that we spoke about, fights fats, and everything to help cleanse our body, okay? So, you're gonna get it how you get it. So,